Well, hello and welcome to the third section of the course here, the Snapchat clone. In this section, the big thing that we're doing here is we're finishing and creating the Snapchat clone that we started in the last section that we called SnapFun. And so sort of the big things that we're going to be learning here is how to work with the Firebase database. That's to store information when one person wants to send what's called a snap to another person. A snap is basically an image with some text associated there. That's all going to be done through the Firebase database. We're also going to learn about storage so that when someone's sending a picture, we can save that in Firebase storage and then eventually delete that later. And we're going to learn how to download images using that SD web image that we had referred to earlier. So we're going to go ahead and get things kicked off in the SnapFun video here. The big thing is we're just setting up the flow of our app, and so you're going to learn more about what our app's going to look like. We're going to work on the UI side of things, and then we'll start moving into some code. All right, so we have an app here where we can successfully create a new user, log in a user, whatever it is that we want to do, but that's really the limit. And ultimately, where we want to get to is a point where someone can, one, see any snaps that they've received from their friends or from themselves, two, be able to create a new snap and, pick a picture, give a caption, choose who they want to send that to, and then three, be able to view that particular snap that someone had sent them. And so in this video, I'd like to lay the groundwork for that by setting out making a, appropriate segue here with someone, successfully logs in or something like that, that we can get them to the next screen. Because right now all we're doing is we're just printing out that, hey, the user successfully signed in, where we would actually want to move them forward. So a lot of storyboard work here, but it's going to be worth it for us. So let's go ahead and move over to that storyboard. And so in the situation that someone was successfully able to log in, or if they were able to create a new account, which essentially we'd log them in if that happened, then what we want to be able to do is pass them on to a table view controller that's embedded inside a navigation controller, because the next screen is going to be the one where we show them all the snaps that somebody has sent them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to grab a navigation controller, which, lucky for us, just so happens to be connected with a table view controller by default. So that kind of saves us a click from having to go add that code out there. So we've gone ahead and we've added that. What we need to do is make a segue between this view controller and this. So we'll just go ahead and do a little control drag here that says we want to do a present modally, right? Because we're going to just completely cover this screen here. It's only if we'd want to dismiss this that ultimately we'd come back. But this moves us into the navigation controller, and the navigation's root view controller is going to be this table view controller. Now, in this situation, we want to have a couple of buttons up at the top here. So let's go ahead and search for a bar button item. I'm going to bring one at the top left. This is going to be the one that allows a user to log out. So I'm going to give it the name log out. Someone taps this button, we essentially dismiss this segue that we had done previously, and we come back to this login or sign up view controller. The situation on the right side here is that they would want to create a snap, and so we're going to add one to the top right here. And with this bar button item, let's go ahead and specify that we want it to be an add, and that makes this cool little plus button. So if that plus button happens, we want to move the user onto a view controller where they can pick out an image and a caption for what it is that they want to send. So I'm going to bring out a view controller, and we're going to just select this plus button here and do a control drag onto this view controller and make this a show segue. Now that we're in a navigation controller, all of our segues should be a show segue so that we can make use of the back button, which, by the way, root view controller here as a name is a terrible one. I'm just going to delete that so that we get that back button by default. Then once we have this in place here, right, someone can specify all of this information. The next step that we would want to move forward onto is allowing somebody to pick who they want to send that particular image to. And so we're going to go pass out another table view controller, because we're going to list out all the people that they could potentially send this to. And we're going to do a segue between the two. So let's just do a control drag between here and here. This should be a show segue, and that will move us over here ultimately. Okay, now with this in place, there's going to be a few little details we need to go back and add, but at least we want to have the bare bones set up here. The next thing that we want to do is give this first segue here a name and then actually call this inside of our code. So I'm going to, again, select this segue right in between the auth view controller and the navigation controller. Let's go ahead and give it an identifier, maybe something like auth success. Okay, and I'm going to copy whatever name I've given it, and your name might be different, that's fine, as long as you copy it exactly. Then come inside of your auth view controller, and instead of just saying, print out user successfully signed in this situation we would want to say perform segue. And as far as the identifier goes, we paste in that one that we had, and we don't need to pass in anything via the sender. So we'll just go ahead and put nil there. I'll bring out that right side menu so you can see that a little bit better. We're getting an error here. I bet this is because we forgot self. Yep, anytime you are working inside of a closure, if you're going to refer back to properties of the class, you've got to add a self dot in front of there. And so this is actually the exact same thing that we'd want to do if they were able to, create a new user. Whether they sign in or create a new user, that is enough for us to say move on to the next one. So we'll just go ahead and have that there. And if this all works out, this will take them to this table view controller here that has a logout button stuff. But to test whether this really works, let's add some code for this logout button, which means we need to make a class for this view controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click here, and we're going to say that we need a new file, and this is going to be a Cocoa Touch class. We want this to be a subclass of a UI table view controller. Make sure you have that UI table view controller. And I'm going to call this my snaps table view controller because it's going to hold a bunch of snaps. So we'll go ahead and create this. I'm going to move it up by its friends here. And now I can go to my storyboard and say this view controller, its class happens to be the snaps table view controller. I'll hit tab or enter to make that official. And now I can select this logout button, do a little split screen here, and I can actually bring this over as an action. So I'm going to put it right below the view did load, maybe just right here. So I'm going to do a control drag right there, and I'm going to make sure that this is an action, and I'm going to call this logout tapped. Okay, go ahead and connect that there. With that in place, I can go back to full screen where I can actually read some code, and I'm going to say, you know what, if someone has tapped logout, we simply just have to dismiss the current view controller. That should be animated, and we're going to not do anything on the completion there, just nil. So let's go ahead and run this, see what it looks like. Should be fairly close to what we're looking for. So we'll go ahead and give this a second. Alright, so we'll try to log in Nick at ZappyCode here. If it works, boom, look at that. We come to the next screen here, and we can even test out this plus button if we want. It'll take us to that next screen, and we can hit back to come here. But if I want to hit log out, it should take me to that auth view controller. If I hit log out, boom, look, it takes me there. And if I log back in, I'm back to this screen, and I can come out and I can come back in, just boom, 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 like that. So that's great that that functionality is there. I'd like to do a little bit of work here with getting this next view controller set up when someone wants to create a snap. So I'm going to move over to our storyboard here, and first I'm going to add some bar button items up to the top right. So I'm going to search for a bar button item, and we can see we've got one right here. So I'm going to put one, well, that's right, we got to have a navigation item first. So I'm going to search for a navigation item. You just have to hover it over this view controller. This essentially allows us to add things here, and so now when I search for a bar button item, I can go ahead and you can see now put those things up at the right. We need two of those. Basically one if someone wants to add a picture from the camera, and then one if they want to select it from their current photos. So with one of these I'm going to select, and this should just be the camera button. The other situation here should be that someone's picking photo from their existing library, and so I think the organized one does a pretty good job of that. It shows the folder. It kind of depicts like, hey, if you tap this, this is going to take you to your folders, and you can choose which order you want these to be in. Doesn't really matter which way you have it. I'm going to go ahead and give a title here to say create snap, just because I think that will give the user some good context as to what's going on here. But with this, we need to have an image view that someone can look at, so I'm going to go ahead and bring out an image view here. Now as far as the sizing on this goes, I'm going to go ahead and just say that, this is going to be, well, we've probably done enough here. I think maybe let's leave this